Completed our investigation of the officer-involved shooting of Errol Bolin that occurred on April the 11th, 2020 in West Terre Haute, near West Ileana Drive and Cruz Place. Start out by saying that this was nothing but an ambush of law enforcement officers. The officers were looking for the suspect, Errol Bolin, when Deputy Lieutenant Hall was fired upon. And at that time, obviously no one understood exactly what was happening, but several gunshots were evidenced by Officer Hall, or Deputy Hall's vehicle. We'll get into some pictures of those photographs here in a minute. As additional officers arrived on the scene, additional shots were fired from the hills and trees at the deputies during this time. As officers continued to approach the shooter, more shots were fired from the brush, or fired in the direction of the officers. Thank God none of them were hit by any of the shots. At the time that the suspect fired shots toward Sergeant Ames from the Indiana State Police, that's when Deputy Donker returned fire with 2 shots. And one of those shots was fatal to the suspect. After reviewing the scene, after the suspect was shot, we were able to find 21 casings. So we know of at least 21 shots that he fired towards police. I commend the bravery of the officers that moved toward the shooter while he was firing in an effort to protect their fellow officers and the public. In analyzing whether an officer shooting is justified, we start out by looking at the Indiana self-defense law. It states that a person is justified in using reasonable force against any other person to protect the person or a third person from what the person reasonably believes to be the imminent use of unlawful force. However, a person is justified in using deadly force and does not have a duty to retreat if the person reasonably believes that force is necessary to prevent serious bodily injury to the person or a third person or the commission of a forcible felony. No person, employer, or estate of a person in this state shall be placed in legal jeopardy of any kind whatsoever for protecting the person or a third person by reasonable means necessary. I can't think of a clearer-cut situation where lethal force would be permitted under Indiana law than the facts of this case. Bolin fired multiple shots at officers who initially responded to the location, then fired multiple shots at other officers as they approached him and attempted to speak with him. There is no dispute that the shots fired by the deputy were justified and legal under Indiana law. With that, I would say that sometimes the photographs speak a million words. And if I can direct your attention to the screen, the first 4 photographs are just photographs of essentially what the officers were dealing with as far as where the suspect was hiding and had maneuvered to the point where he now was putting as you can see, he's behind a lot of brush and trees, etc., when he's firing shots at the law enforcement officers. As the officers were approaching, you see what they were faced with. They didn't even know for sure where the suspect was at. They knew shots were coming out of that vicinity. The next group of photos show the damage to Lieutenant Hall's vehicle, which shots just started being fired by the suspect towards Lieutenant Hall's vehicle. You can see the one there in the door even. Thank God that one didn't hit him in any way. See shots that were to the hood of the vehicle. The next photograph shows the arsenal of weapons that were recovered from the hill and from the suspect. So it appeared this was a planned ambush. I mean, obviously he had a lot of weapons, a lot of ammunition, and a lot of shots were fired unprovoked towards Lieutenant Hall, which started the situation. With that said, once again, the shooting by Deputy Donker is clearly justified. I commend him for his actions to protect his fellow officers and to protect the public. And I also commend the other law enforcement officers that put their lives in jeopardy that were there in an effort to do their job and protect their fellow officers and the public. With that, we'll take any questions anybody might have. We issued a full, complete press release. I didn't go through every item in that because I figured everyone would have that release. If you have any questions about anything specifically, feel free to ask at this time.
So on the photos, were those taken from his point of view, looking back out towards the deputy during the tree?
The first 3 photographs are taken from inside the brush, and if you look closely through those, you can see the police vehicles that are in the background there.
So that's what he would have been looking at.
Yes.
As officers arrived.
And the fourth one is looking up into where he was at.
Okay. And the photos of the individual photos of the individual weapons, are those 4 weapons the ones you believe he was using?
Well, we know some of those weapons were being used, yes. But, I mean, obviously, you know, the axe and some of the other things he had on him, but, you know, we don't know if he used them in any way.
Okay, so some of those weapons were they just in his vehicle or somewhere else, or did he have all of that on him?
Most of them were up around him in his vicinity, within his reach.
He had multiple bags
Okay.
filled with items, including the ammunition and the bladed weapons. And then the firearms were also present.
So it appeared that he was ready for this ambush, that, you know, he had thought this through as far as weapons that he had chosen that he had at his disposal.
Jessica Boland, who notified police, what is her relationship to him?
She's either his wife or girlfriend. Spouse, yeah.
So she believed it was looking for him for wellness because he had said something, maybe threatened suicide or something?
Correct.
Okay. Did she have any knowledge that he was planning to shoot at police, do you believe?
I don't think so.
But he had a military background. Do you believe this was in any way connected, maybe some kind of flashback thing he was going through, or just?
Part of the investigation, we attempted to obtain records from the VA, but they were non-responsive to the subpoena for those records.
But he also had a history of illegal drug use and a criminal, ongoing criminal record and issues with the criminal system.
Of those weapons, guns in particular, was there one that was used? Obviously, from the damage done, it looked like it was probably the handgun and not the shotguns that were used. Is that?
Do you want to deal with that, Sheriff? Do you want to?
Well, I know the 3 rounds that impacted the Durango were from the 357. There was also buckshot that was impacting the vehicle but didn't leave a mark. So we know for a fact that the shotgun was fired and the handgun was fired multiple times.
And towards the end of the altercation with him, the last gun that he did fire was a .357 Magnum twice directly at myself and Officer Donker from the Sheriff's Department.
Any other questions?
Yeah. So you think this is an ambush situation? You think he was wanting to engage police then?
And it sure looks like it because, I mean, you know, the Lieutenant Hall was just looking in the area. I mean, and all of a sudden, you know, the suspect started firing shots at his vehicle. And just the location of where he was at with these bags of ammunition and weapons, I mean, it sure appears that way. We don't know, obviously, for sure, but it appears that way.
He did have a criminal history. Was any of it violent in the past?
I don't know, do you know that,
I
Rob?
don't know.
I'm not sure. I know a lot of it was methamphetamine related and things like that.
Had you ever been called out on him before for anything like this, or?
I don't think anything like this.
Did he say anything as the officers were around?
If he did, I don't know. Do you know, John?
He did not that I'm aware of. I even asked if he had even said anything, and the answer I was is no, he didn't say anything at all.
Officer Donker and myself had two verbal altercations with him where we ordered him to put his firearms down. And both times when we ordered him to do that and asked him to come to our voices, he returned fire in our direction both times. And originally, when the call came in, Lieutenant Hall observed that the back window of the vehicle had been shot out. He got on his PA system and advised him that they were just there to give them assistance due to the fact that they knew that there was something that just wasn't right. They weren't there to arrest them or anything like that, but they were there to provide assistance to him, whether that would have been mental health care or anything like that. And instead, he turned around and fired at Lieutenant Hall and the other deputies that were in the vicinity down at the bottom of the hill.
So he had shot out his own back window of his own vehicle?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So that was a sign that
Something was wrong.
yeah.
Now, it's kind of hard to speculate, but you think this could have been suicide by police situation?
I mean, I know we've talked about that a little bit. We don't know for sure, but, I mean, the only thing is, I mean, remember though, we've got a guy that's not running out in front of everybody either. He's still hiding behind brush and firing shots, so it didn't look like it just a straight up, suicide by police case.
And he had his bags in different locations where he could go and get something from another bag, so to me, it does not appear that it was suicide police, it was an ambush.
Any other questions?
Whose property was this? Was this his property or just?
No, it was not his property.
Did he live in that area?
That I don't know. Do you guys know?
I mean, it wasn't far from there, but not in that direct area, no.
But was there anything in that general area? Was it just woods and farmland?
Yes.
It's kind of remote.
Okay. That concludes the press conference then. Thank you.
Thank you, thank
Will
you.
you take questions on the other cases that are pending, recent cases?
Just so you, before we move on to anything else, I do have a disc of all of these photographs. I left them sitting in my desk, so when we're done here, I can meet you guys just right by this north entrance where the tree is at, and I can deliver those to you at that point.
What are the questions, Lisa?
The Robinson case down in the creek, has anything much beyond on that?
We can't really comment on that either because at this point the investigation is still ongoing. We don't know whether, there's going to be any charges or anything like that. So it's a pending investigation, pending case, so we can't comment at this point on that.
And can you say, did the Robinsons live down there? It seemed like a remote place to be.
It's my understanding they own some property there in that area.
In that area?
That's, yeah.
Okay. All right. And the Kroger parking lot incident, we haven't heard too much about that one either. That one's getting a lot of social media buzz.
That one we will probably be in a position to, within the next week or so, to issue a press release on.
There's still a couple of witnesses that need to be interviewed before our office can do a formal review on it.
So that one is, are both of those investigated by the state police or the
Both by
Robinson is?
sheriff's office.
Okay, and the Kroger is state police.
It's also sheriff. That's why part of the problem is we had 2 homicides in a matter of days, and with a staff of 38 deputies, you can imagine the challenges we're facing trying to track everything down.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.